Hey, Stella.
Hey Joe, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm glad you come out here and talk to me today. I've been excited about getting somebody that's from the other gender's perspective on this job a little bit.
Well, I'll try to give you the best I can give you.
I know you will. Known you for a bit, and I know you've never been quiet with your mouth. Are you going to tell it like it is?
You get the same person whether we're in this room or we're hanging out or whether we're in the police department.
Well, I'm going to tell everybody about you in just a minute, so you'll have to oblige me while I brag on you.
Well, all right.
What year did you start at Lenoir?
So I started at Lenoir in 2012, in July.
All right. So 2012, prior to that, she obtained a BS degree in criminal justice at Gardner Webb University in Little Old Boiling Springs, North Carolina. Ended up going to BLET in Wilkes Community College, and then was hired on straight with Lenoir PD in North Carolina in the patrol division for about 5 years.
Yes, sir.
And then after 5 years there, ended up going to investigations for specialty crimes for about 6 years total. After a 6-year period, she was promoted to sergeant of CID and has worked all their officer-involved shootings since the promotion to sergeant, correct?
Yeah, I still carry a caseload, so I go out anytime the division's called out. I work all the crimes right alongside them,
Right.
and I still take cases of my own. Yes, sir.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll just kind of take it from the beginning, how you got into it. What was the inspiration that at some point in your life as a young female decided you wanted to go to law enforcement as a career?
Well, I wanted to study law, and so I started that path, and then I actually took an internship in Caldwell County with guardian ad litem, and I just saw that was the justice did not progress like I thought it did. It's not like TV. It's super slow, and I wanted to do something involved. I didn't want to sit back. I didn't want to sit and have other outside things dictate what happened in people's lives. I wanted a direct hand in it. So,
How old were you when you started thinking about that?
19-ish, 18, 19.
Yeah.
So, I wasn't old enough to go to Billy T. So I just tossed the idea around and continued, my education to see what other things were out there.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't know any cops growing up. I grew up good. I didn't have any interactions with law enforcement at all. I didn't know anybody. So I kind of came in blind.
Nobody in your family was in the business or anything like that?
No, sir. No trouble. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't know anybody.
Yeah.
So I seemed like a good idea at the time.
Well, was it a good idea?
It was the best idea,
Good.
and it was the most rewarding thing I've ever done.
Well, that's good to hear. I think there's a lot of people that jump into the pool, which is criminal justice, and find that the waters are either not suitable to them after a period of time because it takes a lot. It's going to ask a lot from you personally and professionally.
It has taken a lot.
Yeah.
But it's given a lot.
Yeah.
So for that, sitting here today, 12, 13 years later, you're not seeing the same person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's for all of us.
So I attended University of Charlotte and majored in criminal justice too. But what I found was when you decided you were going to go into law enforcement, well, you wanted to do law side first.
Correct.
What changed into law enforcement from the law part?
Because the law part the criminal justice system and the judicial system is much slower than people really realize. Mm-hmm. And by that point, everything's done pretty much. That the hands-on part has already been handled.
The case is prepared and it just has to be presented.
Yes,
to
sir,
a court.
correct.
Yeah.
So I wanted that hands-on part. I wanted to make the difference in people's lives on the onset.
Mm-hmm.
not after everybody else already had their hands in it. I wanted that initial, how do I help people and how do I prevent problems?
Right.
And not be a constant fixer or, a constant follow-up to everybody else's hands already been in something.
Mm-hmm. So that led you going to University of Gardner Webb.
I mean, I was already at Gardner
You
Webb,
was
but
already
yeah.
when you decided.
But I decided, that last semester I was old enough to where I could go to BLET.
So you were already doing criminal justice.
Yeah.
So this was what I was going to say earlier. When I went to UNC Charlotte, and this has been an eternity ago, I majored in criminal justice too. But what I found when I came out, there was a period of time where I stayed in the private sector for a long time before I actually went to criminal justice or to being in law enforcement in general. But what I found was everything I learned in college was...
You're exactly right.
I mean, it was useful as far as knowing case law and where Miranda come from and some of the big cases that you're going to hear from anyway when you get in basic training. But everything I collected from college, however useful, was not the main tools that I grasped for when I went to work in law enforcement. There was like an expectation there that I was overly prepared, and you're not.
Yeah, you're kind of judged by back then you were judged if you came in with a degree that you were, some sort of sanctimonious entity, and I wasn't. I just was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life.
Right.
But you're exactly right. That had nothing. That first day in that patrol car had that college, that degree was useless, just a piece of paper for me.
Yeah.
It taught me how to read and write, and I'm, very thankful for all those papers and things I had to do now as a supervisor, having to do a lot of things like that. But none of that mattered. None of that kept me alive.
Right. Yep. There's nothing that I got from college that was like street smart. No. And you have to have the case law part too. You have to know, what the Bill of Rights are and Constitution means and everything that goes along with just knowing how to do your job in a legal sense. But the street smarts, you don't get any of that at school. And that's, to me, probably is factor one as far as priority, to keep yourself safe. And we've had other people on here that talk about how important body language is and how to read that. And that's one thing I worried about so much is the younger people I talk to, it seems like social media has become such a big part of their life, how they communicate, that doing this in front of each other is kind of a lost art. Yeah. Is to see, even how people, their facial expressions, because you can get a lot from somebody's facial expressions. And I think that the younger generation, not saying anything bad about anybody, but is it like a diminished skill?
We're really having to work on cadets and people to get them to a point to where they're picking up on things that maybe we grew up with, that we just had that, maybe an intrinsical, some sort of gift that we came. Yeah,
I think it's just experience from being. There's a difference between talking in friends. It's easy to get in front of your friend and talk about any conversation. You don't even think about that. But do that to a stranger that you suspect of doing a horrible crime. Then it's different. Yeah.
Or being deceptive.
Yes.
Or being a threat to you.
Or they just don't like law enforcement in general.
Yeah. That's something. But I will say, education, I'm a huge advocate for education and these officers to actually have that because of the situation we find ourselves in as a country, and being able to be articulate and being able to speak well and present well, and just get your thoughts on paper, because like we talked about with the court system, you're not going to remember what happened today in 5 years. If you're going call to call to call to call, So their ability to take their thoughts and their observations and put it on paper and put it in a logical piece of narrative, for lack of a better word, I'm not seeing that either. And I think we need that education so desperately. Yeah. And I'm very thankful for, my family providing enough to be able to go to college and me starting out with that.
Right. So when you were finished up your criminal justice degree at Gardner Webb University, then you attended Wilkes Community College for BLET. How many was in your class starting out before they were cut?
I can't remember. We graduated somewhere between like 12 and 15.
How many do you think started the class?
I think we lost 2.
That's actually good.
Yeah, it's very good. It was very good numbers.
That's a good percentage.
It was not a berating school.
Yeah.
It was a very well run school.
What was the most difficult part for you in BLET?
I don't struggle with education.
POPAT?
No, I didn't struggle with POPAT. I struggled with the actual distance running. Mm-hmm. But I didn't struggle with the POPAT. I struggled initially with the push-ups and stuff.
That was mine. Sit-ups and push-ups.
Yeah, I didn't, but I had, in my mind, I had started preparing months before. I didn't just on a whim go to BLET. I had started the PT because I knew that was going to be my weak spot. I really knew that. I'd never been a sports kind of person. That's not my forte. But yeah, I'd already prepared a little bit, but that was the struggle I had. The education, the scenarios, any of that, I didn't even worry about any of that.
I was same boat. It was the POPAT was my struggle.
And that was the old POPAT, the door and the tunnel and the...
Yes. So you'll have to educate me. How's it changed now?
Oh, the door's gone, the tunnel's gone, there's a fence, and the dummy, it's not necessarily the drag, it's a 2-part series now. And I'm not a PT instructor. We
still drag a dummy?
Yeah, you roll the dummy. You
roll it.
Wrestle the dummy.
So it's easier, I'm assuming.
It's dead weight. It's different.
Yeah.
It's just different.
So, but just to help me a little bit, you think it's on par with the old one as far as difficulty? They just changed it up?
No, for me, I think it's easier.
Really?
But remember the street names? You had to remember the street names. You had to run down and back, and you had to remember those cross streets.
Yeah.
That's not a part of it. And I think that was a huge mental part of that POPAT.
As soon as they told me the street names, I was just like, Carroll Drive
Yeah.
while I was running, Carroll Drive.
Yeah.
I never did forget.
Yeah.
Because I know I'd forget it if I just didn't say it over and over.
Yeah, I mean, and it's different struggles for different people, really. Yeah. You got to flat foot jump this, I think it's supposed to be a ditch or whatever, and then you got to leap over this fence. But it's just different.
Yeah.
I can't really, because that person that did that old POPAT is a different person that is sitting, that does it.
Oh yeah.
Now as a certified law enforcement. There's a whole lot more riding on it back then, and it seemed like such a big deal.
Right. That was like the only thing.
That was the only deal
I was
for us.
About
yeah.
Was that. I was blessed to be able to. Oh, I found, number one, I think if you find law enforcement interesting, the books part of it, BLET is going to be a breeze. Mm-hmm. I think there were some people that wanted to be a law enforcement officer, but they couldn't stand the fact of studying law or the general statutes or whatever that's in the blocks. So I think they struggled more with BLET just because of that aspect. They found some of the content boring, and some of it is boring.
Some of it is.
But if you're that kind of person where you really are intrigued by the super details of law enforcement constitutional parts, Mirandas, and why do you have a Miranda and things like that, you're going to do well with it.
I just enjoyed knowing where it came from. Like, why?
Right.
How did we get here? How did it go through those appeals? And how did we come
Mm-hmm.
to those, Supreme Court decisions?
Yeah.
And how are those, whether, from perspective, detrimental to the job we do,
Mm-hmm.
or are they helping us?
Yeah.
And I do think they're super beneficial. And then when do they apply? I think, especially Miranda and your Sixth Amendment. And I have a lot of officers that come out of BLT and don't even know.
How did that happen?
I don't know if they're just have so much thrown at them and they've never been in that. Because you can tell somebody that it is under arrest or the functional equivalent, but if they've never been in a situation where they understand what functional equivalent means, they can't apply it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they don't understand that your sixth attaches after a true bill of indictment. They can't even get the basics,
Mm-hmm.
because it is overwhelming to understand how our court system works and how we just don't throw people in handcuffs and put them in jail. That's the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, we have to continue this education whenever we bring kids, or they're not kids. We bring people
Mm-hmm.
out of BLET and we bring them into our agencies. And I try to do that. I try to, give them pieces of paper that explain in a logical way when these cases apply.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to continue reminding them, and not just on a screen in service that we click through because we have a lot on our plates.
Mm-hmm.
We need to really make sure, because that's what'll take your, that'll take your badge away.
Yeah,
You violate somebody's rights.
Not only that, but they also can take a top slam shut case and throw it out of the courtroom.
Yeah.
Just by a small mistake.
And something you didn't even intend.
Yeah.
A case, and then a case that could be near and dear to my heart can be thrown out because of something that you did as the first responding officer.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So after you graduated BLET, then did you already have a job lined up at Lenoir PD, or did you just go through the application process?
I did not. I went through, I was in the process with Hickory PD, and that didn't work out. I quickly realized that wasn't the place for me. Through their hiring process, I went to Lenoir. I was in Lenoir's process as well. Went through their process, and there was 3 applicants at that point, and we were still doing oral boards and the whole 9.
Mm-hmm.
That was my second experience in an oral board. My first was at Hickory PD. So I went through that, and I was hired at Lenoir, and that's where I started.
So that's something that I ended up having to do several oral boards, but when I was hired as a deputy with Caldwell, I did not. So what did you do to prepare for an oral board? Or did you even know that was
I
coming?
had no idea.
Yeah.
Nobody told me about an oral, like what that entailed. Like, and so when I walked into Hickory's oral board, it's a little bit different. It's like, the table seemed like as big as this room, but it probably wasn't.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of people there, and it felt like an interrogation. And as somebody that's never been in trouble or didn't, I was just trying to do the right thing and just trying to come out here and do the Lord's work. I felt attacked, to be perfectly honest with you. But that wasn't their intention. Looking back now, I know why they do that. But then I felt, I walked out of there in tears because I just felt like defeated.
So for anybody that's listening, why do they do that?
They do that to test who you are and how you present,
Right.
and how you're able to face that adversity, being just one sole person.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I had no reference point to know why or anything.
Right.
And here these people were coming at me. But then I started talking to people, and I realized there was a purpose for it. And that, things work out in ways that we can't explain to put you in places to where you belong.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really honestly believe that. So my Lenoir oral board went well, obviously. And, you know, we were polygraphing. We were ahead of most agencies back then.
So y'all did polygraph as
We
part of
did.
the hiring process?
Yes, sir.
Really?
Yeah.
How was that?
Nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
When you've never been a part of anything like that, it was nerve-wracking. But I think it's super beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we use those in investigations. So I think they're very, very beneficial.
So is it something that they just talk general questions to get a baseline on your polygraph, and
Yes, sir.
then they just what is the most intrusive questions they'll ask you in the hiring process on the polygraph?
I can't remember.
Right.
And I'm not a polygraph examiner, so I can't speak to that. But, you know, they ask, obviously, about drug use.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have a polygraph examiner right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's not something, I tossed it around, but
Yeah.
I've got a lot of other things, you know, on my plate that.
Can you just get that from Justice Academy, that certification, or
No, I think it's specialized.
it's specialized?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
very much specialized.
Yeah.
I know that our guy went to Pennsylvania, maybe
Really?
for like a month. Like had to live in barracks there.
Huh.
It's a very in-depth school.
Yeah.
It's not something to take lightly. Like it's not something to. People think it's, you know, junk science, but it's not.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had polygraphs. The oral board, we had interview with the chief. You know, where a condition was offered, and
Mm-hmm.
all that went pretty quickly. It wasn't a long drawn out thing, but
In your opinion, based on how law enforcement hires most of its prospects, do you think that they are thoroughly going through every door that they possibly can efficiently to get the right person for the job? Do you think
I can only speak for my agency.
Yeah.
And I think we do a really good job with our backgrounds. I've done backgrounds,
Mm-hmm.
and I genuinely sit down and talk to people.
Mm-hmm.
I can't speak for every background investigator. I can't speak for, you know, I don't know how they run theirs. But from the candidates that we get, we do try to do a
Mm-hmm.
good job in vetting those people. I've seen other agencies that may not,
Mm-hmm.
but that's on them.
Yes, every agency has its own practices in hiring. The reason I'm even trying to lead you down that road is because I've had debates with people like, oh, y'all hire just whoever you want, you hire your best friends.
No.
And it's not. It is like the most strict and brutal hiring process that sometimes you can go through.
It's super intrusive, really.
It is. And there's even some agencies that look at your credit.
We look at credit.
They look if you've been delinquent on your taxes ever.
Yeah.
Like ever, not just currently, but ever.
Well, that's a F8 question.
Yep, that's right. They look to if you've ever had a criminal history, how your driving record is, because you got to drive a patrol car. So that's intriguing to them. Talk to you about polygraphs. Have you ever stolen anything? Even a candy bar. Have you ever smoked a joint?
Yeah.
I try to explain this to some folks when they get on that, well, y'all just hire your best buddies. And it's not that way.
No.
It's pretty, it's like if you've made it to where you've actually wearing a uniform with a badge and you've sworn oath, I mean, you've went through or gone through probably the most stringent hiring process that you can for any job, period.
Yeah, I talk to your family. I talk to, you know, your friends. I talk to your former coworkers. I talk to your school directors.
And when you're saying this, you're talking about doing background checks on the person that's applying.
Right.
So like when you fill out that job list and you say, give me several references that could speak of your character. So what I have done, and not just on law enforcement, but I've done this for other jobs I had prior to law enforcement. So if you listed your uncle, I'd call your uncle and I'd say, do you know anybody that knows him? Well, yeah, he used to be buddies with John Doe that lives in the community. Do you have his name and phone number? Yes, I do. So I'd take that information and I'd call that guy, not the person you put on your list.
The person you put on your list is going to talk highly of you.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And who else knows that person better than you? So, yeah, we do that, and we try to make sure that the best candidates come in our door, because those candidates that we hire from the second that they are hired are a direct reflection of me.
Right.
And I don't want anybody to make me look bad.
Right.
Whether that be on the job or when they go home. And, you know, sometimes we miss the mark. Mm-hmm. That's just human nature. People are deceptive.
Right.
People have ulterior motives, and that is in every line of work. Mm-hmm. But I can honestly say that I've worked alongside the greatest men and women in that county. Yeah. And there's people with hearts of gold.
Yeah.
So all that stuff that the media is telling people, that's not true. It's not everywhere. Or
either it's in such a small, minute instance that it's not a proper reflection on the entire community.
You're correct. It's just a small percentile, a half a percentile of what we do every single day. Mm-hmm. These men, they go out here and people don't have gas in their car and they go buy them gas, or their kids don't have Christmas and the men will go out and buy Christmas. I've seen so much good versus the little bit of bad.
Yeah. So once you got into Lenoir, after you went through the hiring process, you went straight to the road.
Yes, sir.
How was that versus all the training, the college degree, the criminal justice or BLET, graduating that, and talk about the first couple of weeks on the road. How was that?
It's the most stressful thing I've ever been through in my life.
Yeah.
I think when you come into this job, you want to do a good job. And I so badly, that's my greatest strength and my greatest weakness at the same time as I'm a perfectionist. I wanted so desperately to do a good job. And when you have that person sitting in your passenger seat and they are constantly finding fault, because they're doing that for purpose. Mm-hmm. They're wanting you to make sure that everything is good and that you're capable of operating in a high-stress environment by yourself, but you just feel like, I can't do nothing right. That was very stressful. Very, very stressful.
Yeah, I remember when my first couple of nights, I just couldn't understand that I just met my sergeant, lieutenant, and corporal and field training officer, and within 15 minutes I was in a passenger seat with a badge and a gun and had all the rights in the world to arrest somebody, and I was going down the road with my field training officer for whatever came our way that night. And it's so fast, the progression of being in training and then going to the road. That was something it just amazed me, and I think it is overwhelming. And the thing is, not only are you a little bit intimidated about doing your job in the beginning, but for me, it was like, I didn't want to mess up.
Yeah.
I didn't want to say something stupid on the radio.
Yeah.
Because you don't even think about that. That's a big part of it, is everybody critiques your radio traffic etiquette. Yeah. And some counties or agencies use 10 codes and then some don't.
I keyed up and instead of saying PD, I said county. Because, I had done an internship with the county and that's all I'd heard. And so, I vividly remember where I was at when I did that. So. Yeah. You're embarrassed, and, it's not, like, looking back now, it's so silly. Mm-hmm. And we look at these trainees, and I think a lot of times we don't, maybe us as older field training officers or in different divisions, forget that stress that those folks were under. Yeah,
I think you become accustomed to it. It's like breathing. When you hit your lapel mic or key up on radio anywhere, it's just like talking like we are now. In the beginning, it is not that way.
No, you can't figure out what you're going to say. 10-8, 10-24 no report seems like, in your brain you can't make that make sense. Yeah. But, plain talk, do I give a dissertation? And plain talk is something that I don't like. Yeah. I think it's a lot of talking. It's a lot of airspace, and somebody could be in danger. Yep. So if we can just say 10-8, 10-24 in our report, we're good.
Yeah. So I think, wasn't there something at one point where like it was like a grant for Viper radios that 10 codes had to be eliminated or something because of the grant requirements?
I thought that was something to do with the years before we came with Adam's critical incident.
I don't know on that one.
Where the agencies were all using Viper, and so that we could all communicate effectively.
Yeah, different agencies were hearing the same radio frequencies if they scanned.
I don't have the answer for that, but what I will say is if we can keep the radio traffic short.
Yes, that is important. So even if it is plain talk, just report taken back in service.
Yeah, so that we don't get other people that may have their blue lights on, stopping a car and taking fire.
Yeah.
That's my worst fear, is somebody will be talking about a dogs at large call and another guy is taking fire and can't get out. Just like, your first podcast with, with Jordan keying up and hearing that walking.
Yeah.
And now, I think we've fixed that to where even if you're keying up, dispatch can still hear it. But you don't feel that in that heat of that moment. You're feeling some frustration if somebody's chatting on the radio. But I'm sorry, we got sidetracked there, but that's not a big deal at all. I think we're talking about the
intimidation of the first couple of weeks of actually hitting the road for the first time, and we got off on radio traffic and how that can even be intimidating. I'll tell one quick story about mine. Was I had a field training officer, loved him to death, respect him a lot, and I had been riding with my primary field training officer for a while, and it was finally time to ride with somebody else. And this guy was pretty squared away, had been in a couple of agencies before. He was at Caldwell. He's still there now. And I had an issue when I was calling out traffic stops on the radio, the order, like from the make and model, color and tag and all that. And I was mixing the order up. I couldn't get it right. It hadn't seated in my head yet how to just proficiently say the traffic stop in order. And finally, I'd called it in wrong again. And he looked at me and he said, "You call it in wrong one more time, I'm going to fire you." And it scared me to death because, he really he didn't have the authority to fire me, but I didn't know that. But even I didn't want him writing a negative in my DOR. But what it did is it fixed me. Yeah. Like right there. And it was hard to get. Like you almost went like, oh God, I just went to BLET and sucked it up for a POPAT, and I'm going to get fired in my first 2 weeks in the job because I can't call a traffic stop in right. But I think that's a lot of people that I ended up eventually training. When I come down hard on them like that, it was for a purpose.
Yeah. Because
sometimes if you're just not getting it, you need something to snap you in and say, this is serious. I'm not just wasting my words right now.
Right.
I'm not telling you you're wrong because I don't like you. I'm telling it because you're not doing it right. And you need to start fixing it. This is the third time I've told you.
Yeah.
That's when it has to get serious. And some people don't know what being wrong is like. No. They get participation trophies.
You're right.
It's a different generation from when I grew up, and that's not their fault. It's not my fault either. But what is my fault is if I don't teach you how to do it.
My job's to keep you alive.
Yep.
Now you have me questioning how I call in stops.
So, I think I don't know if it's the most stressful part of the job, but in the beginning, it's asking a lot for a brand new trainee to come in and start getting past those 12 weeks of field training.
It's the highs and lows, man, because you just got your badge and your family gets to see you take that oath and you're so proud of yourself, and then you're not doing anything right.
Yeah.
It's a real high and low.
Yeah.
And I think we have to keep that in mind as field training officers.
Yeah, it needs to be. I think it's the most important position in the whole department.
I absolutely do. It's not something that shouldn't be taken lightly.
Yeah. But so you started getting squared away with training. I'll ask you this because I'm highly interested, and there's not a lot of females that come through patrol. Obviously, there are on different agencies, but where we're from, it's not a high population of female officers in our county. You're one of the few. How was your perspective going through field training? Was it harder for you? Did they ask more of you, or did they treat you any different?
I didn't think they treated me any different. And to this day, I still don't think they treated me any different. They wanted me to prove myself. Mm-hmm. But looking back, if you are a certain look, or if you have a certain aura about you or whatever, you automatically get, respect.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this because for me being a female. It could happen to, we know some really, really small, I know some really small deputies. Mm-hmm. And I know some bigger guys. But I feel like I did have to work harder. Mm-hmm. And I think not saying anything, this is just human nature. This is proven human nature that males want to take care of a female. Mm-hmm. They want to. That's just something we can't change that. Mm-hmm. But I worked my behind off to make sure they knew that I wasn't going to leave them, and we're still, some of the guys that I came up with, we're still really good friends. Mm-hmm. And I earned that respect. I earned my place there. I think now society has changed a little bit. This was pre-Ferguson, this was pre-body cam, this was pre-Me Too movement, this was all that happened way after. And I do believe I had to work hard. And now we're accepting of everybody, and maybe it wasn't that way. I was one of the only females mm-hmm. In our area. And there were two, eventually one left for other things, but they were on different rotations than mm-hmm. I was. So, but those men never treated me any different, and to this day they don't treat me. I'm one of them. Yeah. And I think that's strange, and maybe that's strange for their home life to understand. Mm-hmm. But I'm no different.
Yeah. So I think I've talked to some females that's not been in law enforcement, and it's come up as like, I've always wanted to do that. I just don't think I have it in me to do it. Or I think what they ask of me, I don't know if I'm capable of doing. For anybody that's out there, female, thinking about coming into the career, I mean, what could you tell them? What would be the thing you would say, focus on this?
Focus on what's in your heart. If you have a passion for it, you are only as strong as how strong your mind is. Mm-hmm. You can push through anything, but you have to have a strong moral compass and core and want to do the right thing and do this for the right reasons. It's not for the pay. It's not for the clout. It's not for Instagram. It's not for TikTok. It's not for any of that. It's not, you will sacrifice your heart and soul for this. So if that's something you want to do and you genuinely want to do it and do it for the right reasons, your body can follow. Mm-hmm. You can get in your PT shape. You can do it, and you just have to find the right place for you. Like I said earlier about, the path that led me to Lenoir Police Department, and there were some other, side quests, mm-hmm. In there that we've talked about privately, but you can do that, but you have to prove it first to yourself, and then don't let anybody give you a no. Ask why. If they're giving you a no, ask why, then address it, and don't come out here and embarrass me.
That's a good point.
Because it's not like we're such a, I don't want to use the word minority, but we are in this demographic of law enforcement that everything that another female does reflects badly on me, whether I even knew that person. And that's what infuriates me.
Mm-hmm.
Is I earned my place here, and do not come out here and embarrass me.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be the stereotype. And so you're capable of it. You can do it if you're doing it for the right reasons.
Mm-hmm. And I think that just the right reasons come from the heart.
It does.
That's the only way.
And if it doesn't come from the heart, you will quickly find out who has the heart and who doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And those people won't succeed.
Once you got into, after you got out of field training and you were actually hired, I mean, did you feel a sense of camaraderie and respect amongst everybody you worked with, no matter if they were female or male?
Absolutely. I did, and I still do. We have I know I'm biased, but we do have the best agency in this county, really. Mm-hmm. I honestly believe that. I've been through a lot of things. Our house caught fire in 2020. Some of my family didn't show up, but the police department showed up.
Yeah.
A couple weeks ago during the hurricane, I slept at the police department for 3 days with an infant. My family, some of them didn't ask how we were doing, but those officers made sure I had a break.
Yeah.
And those dispatchers took care of me. When I had the baby, some of my family members still hadn't seen the baby. Mm-hmm. But the police department showed up. The sheriff's office showed up. They wanted to be a part of our life.
Yeah.
So this is really, that's the family that I've built, is this career.
Yeah, and I think I say the same thing. It's odd. I remember when I was in basic law enforcement training, one of the early instructors said, you're going to lose close friends and family because of this career, because of you choosing to take up a badge. I was like, bullshit. That I could see that happen to some people. That's not going to happen to me. It did.
It did.
And it surprises me, even to this day. And
it disappoints me.
Yeah, it does. But the family you create in law enforcement it's hard to describe how genuine it is to somebody that's not been in it. Of course, if you've been in it, and I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's just like a bond that I think everybody kind of knows that line you walked, and it's easier to relate to that person because they've been in your shoes.
Yeah.
It's totally odd. You may lose a little bit of family and friends, but you're going to gain a whole another one.
And then you gain, not only do you gain the men and women or mm-hmm. men that I work alongside, but I get to gain the spouses. And sometimes I'm not the best, Joe, I'm not the best at being, getting our nails done and all that. I don't do any of that. That shop, we don't. I'm not that girl.
Yeah.
And I've never been that way. So I think that's also hard for me, is being accepted by the ladies.
Right.
Listen, I'm not here to take your man, trust me. But I think that's a weird bridge for me to cross with them. But the ones that I have, mm-hmm. And I make sure they're taken care of. If their spouses are involved in something, I'm the first one. Mm-hmm. I want to be that first person to knock on their door and be like, hey, they're okay.
Yeah. And I think that's important.
I would want somebody to do that for me.
Yeah. And I think that's just tough in general, whether you're a male or a female, having to respond to that spouse at home saying, hey, I'm here. I know you're seeing me roll up, but I'm telling you, he's okay or she's okay. But just that, I think that's something that law enforcement doesn't think about enough, is the support of the spouse of the person that's in law enforcement. And they are part of the family, absolutely. I think everybody, thinks of them as part of the family, but it's that if something bad was to happen to my partner, who would be the one? And I know some agencies have a form that they'll fill out. It's like, if something was to happen, who would be the person we would need to contact?
Yeah.
And I always put my neighbor Hootie, he's a dire man to my wife's family is important. But I knew if it was 2:00 in the morning and Hootie was knocking on Jody's door and I was at work, she would know. She would know why Hootie's knocking on the door at 2. And I just don't know. I love Hootie to death, but he wouldn't be prepared for that with her.
Right.
So that's when you need good law enforcement to back that person up.
Yeah. And I don't, for years it was always my dad.
Yeah.
I would, any critical, any car crash, anything I was involved in, I automatically called my dad.
Mm-hmm.
But now I don't have that. So,
Yeah.
I'm going to cry.
Yeah.
So now we have to figure out what I'm going to do for my mom, But Matt and I are super blessed because we understand each other. And, Matt knows if I've had a bad day. Matt knows if I've had a critical incident. Matt knows everything. We are not, and this is a conversation that I'm not a normal person, so I'm probably not the best advice, but I don't know how you can't be transparent with your spouse. Because that's all I've ever been about my job.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to be normal. I can't imagine being married to a normal person or being in a relationship with a normal person. I could never do it.
And for people that's listening, you're married to another person that's in law enforcement.
I am.
So, I mean, that's different. It's because you don't really have to explain the job to your spouse.
No.
And I found that I had to explain a lot of things to my spouse that's not in law enforcement. Now, she ended up, understanding everything over time. But in the beginning, things work a little different.
Yeah, and there's so much because you snap on people. You come home and you feel you've had to deal with this all day long, and you just don't want to talk anymore.
Yeah.
I just don't want to talk, and I don't even want to talk about the weather or what we're going to watch on TV. I don't want to make decisions. I don't want to decide where we're going to go because I've made decisions all day, life or death decisions all day long, and I'm tired.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people may. And I've talked to ladies that are either in a relationship or married to male cops, and I don't know what I'm doing wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I've felt that way before. Like, what am I doing wrong? I've prepared a meal. I tried to make everything cool when you get home, and you're mad. And I don't know what I did wrong. And it's not you. You didn't do anything wrong. It's the job. And I don't know how to fix it. That's something you as a person has to fix.
It's a high stress environment. I mean, there's been days where I'd check on duty, and it seemed like it never stopped till 2 hours after I was supposed to be off.
Right.
And that's when I was driving home, was 14-hour day, not a 12-hour day, a 14-hour day. And I'd be driving home, and like, you don't even want to see the door. You just want to walk through the damn door when you get home. And you can't describe a 14-hour day that's been just continuous call after call after call to anybody.
You're dirty and you stink because you've had to. You went into a house that had like cigarette smoke and nastiness, and you just want to take a shower. You just want to be quiet. You just want to be quiet.
Yeah.
And you got all these other expectations. So, and I try to explain when I do finally make that friendship with that spouse. I try to explain that. And here's how they're feeling. Here, don't internalize that you're doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've made some great friends. We vacation with people. We have a great friend group. And now when we're expanding to families, and we're all maturing and having kids, and that's that's difficult.
Yeah.
And now it's not just me.
Mm-hmm.
Some other person depends on me. So
yeah.
It's so rewarding. It
is. It's a sacrifice, but on the other side, there is a reward to that sacrifice. I mean, law enforcement community is amazing, and I'm thankful for it, to be honest with you.
I mean, I think people don't realize how much we miss.
Yeah.
That they, I really didn't think about it. And looking back over 12 years, how much I've missed.
Yeah.
How many times I got up in the middle of the night and had to go into work to work crime scenes. How I've missed, church services. And I've missed big events. I've missed Christmases and Thanksgivings and New Year's and everything. I've missed everything.
Listen, I'll say this. You're talking about the holidays, missed and things. There was a period there where I worked like 3 or 4 straight Thanksgivings on Thanksgiving Day. And, my entire life, childhood, and even teenager, college, early 20s consisted of every Thanksgiving you go to grandma or grandpa's or mom or dad's and, you do the Thanksgiving Day. And having about 3 in a row, that one period of time for me, I'm going to tell you what I was thankful for. There was a church that brought styrofoam packaged meals up to the sheriff's office. And, it was just a piece of dressing and some turkey that would eventually be lukewarm by the time you got to the sheriff's office and pick it up, and some gravy on it and a yeast roll or something. And it was the best thing ever for me. As little as it was like, for me, because, everything's closed on Thanksgiving Day too, so you're not eating anywhere unless you brought your lunch. But for me, I can't remember the name of the church. I need to talk to somebody because I think they still do it. But I want to say thank you to that church, because to me it meant so much to me. Those 3 years, that's what my Thanksgiving meal was what that church brought to the sheriff's office. And because I had no family in Caldwell. Like, there's not a house that I could just stop by and say, hey, you guys, I'm still on duty, but I wanted to say hi to the family or nothing. None of my family was in Caldwell. So that was a big deal for me, that church. I appreciate them doing that. And I really wanted to say thank you to them, because to me it was the thought. Yeah. It wasn't the actual food itself. It was the actual thought. And I think that's important. There's good people in the community that support not just law enforcement, but first responders in general, fire, EMS. And it's just it's a good thing. And it gives us the ability to, even if it is a styrofoam container, and even if we are stuck there and we're still answering calls, we're able to sit down with each other during that time, and we're not having to go hit a drive-through or whatever. We can sit down with each other. And we've missed so much. And Matt's worked. I've rode in every holiday. Like, if he's working, I ride. I don't have anything else. Right. If I didn't. So I spent many days, even if I wasn't working, in a patrol car with you guys. Yeah. So that became our family. Mm-hmm. And I'm so thankful for that. There's a lot of people that spend holidays by themselves. Yeah. Yeah, they do. And at least we have, even if we're out here working, at least we have each other. Yeah. And at least we have people that think about us. The community where we live and where you work is amazing. I mean, even now, it has changed a little bit since COVID. I think COVID really kind of messed up a lot of things. Mm-hmm. We used to get people bringing stuff all the time, and it just became overwhelming. Yeah. I do remember those to-go plates at the sheriff's office. Yeah, I think they still do it. They still do it. Yeah. Some people go in there and raid them. they would give you like a little brownie or something, that'll be gone. Yeah. Especially if you're working night shift, the day shift's already taken it. Yeah, they're gone by then. That's for sure. So you got into patrol 5 years. You had a critical incident. Yeah, a critical incident happened on my shift. Yeah. How did that change you any? It changed a lot. You have gut checks a lot of times. I mean, probably the first week you're infiltrating all the way through, there's a gut check every once in a while. That's a gut check. And I'd field trained somebody, and that was his first night out of field training. And
for the first time, that was my first trainee, and you want your first trainee to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
But you never expect that their first night on their own, something bad's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So you start, in your mind, you're wondering, did I do a good enough job?
Mm-hmm.
Did I really do a good enough job to keep this person alive? This is not, did I do a good enough job to keep their job? This is, are they going to live?
Right.
So that's a lot on a person to deal with, not only what's happening in the event that's transpiring, but to think about other people that are, shoulder to shoulder with you or your trainee.
Mm-hmm.
And then, to go through all that, made me a better person. It has been, everything's a challenge. When you go through a life-changing event, everything after that, there's a before and an after of everything. How you operate, how you function, how your personality changes. And that could be from anything.
Right.
Everybody processes trauma differently. And what may be a bad day for you, it may just be just a normal day for me.
Mm-hmm.
So, it made me a better person, made me a better investigator now, looking back.
Right.
And I'm so thankful for it. I'm thankful for where we're at as far as both of our agencies are concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of bad things happen in Caldwell County.
It's amazing. It's like the highest rate I know of.
Yeah.
In North Carolina.
It's a dangerous place that nobody even thinks about.
Yeah.
And the guys don't get enough credit for what they do every single day.
Right. So from that point there, did you have, we were talking earlier today a little bit, and you were talking about how your outlook, especially with like your life, how you looked at what happened on duty transferred into life and how it changes later because you have additional family member with you now.
I do.
How did your perspective change?
In respect to my daughter?
Yeah, like from when you were on the road to now, the dangers involved with the job.
The dangers of, I so badly want and deep-seatedly desire to worry about my husband leaving every day. But I have a peace about him that I've always had. But now I think, I could walk away from this job today if it meant my daughter. The person I was back then, I would just work and work and work and work. And I've seen some really, really, really bad stuff. Working the type of cases that I work, and it never bothered me. I could, I worked until my due date. I worked 2 infant fatalities during my pregnancy. I worked probably over 30 crime scenes, and none of that stuff. It was all good. I was fine. Now, you can ask Matt later how he didn't want me to do any of that.
Yeah. But
then the second that I had that baby, it changed my life. I thought and people are going to watch this and they're going to say, I told you so. Because I've always denied that this is going to change me. Because I never thought that I would be here. I never imagined being a parent. But, when they handed me that baby and I looked at how little this baby is. And I'm responsible for her.
Mm-hmm.
She can't defend herself. And how could anybody hurt something like that?
Mm-hmm.
How could you? I don't understand it. And, now it's like I put all those things, all those memories and all those scenes and all that crazy stuff in little boxes, and I buried them. But whenever I had her, I thought, dang, but I think that things happen. Like I told you, things happen for a reason. I was able to deal with those crime scenes. I was able to do that and get the justice that I needed for those people. And I can separate myself.
Yeah.
And so, I commend these guys that come in here with children and do this job.
That's one thing I always never had children. Just a choice.
Right.
And knowing what I've seen throughout the years in the career, I don't know how I would have reacted to having a child and having to load up in uniform and go that road every day. But people do it. It's more people have children than don't.
Yeah.
And they do it all the time. But it's just, I don't know the feeling of that commitment that you have with a child versus the dangers you risk every time putting on a uniform, and how you weigh that. It's just not a stress I didn't have to deal with.
I don't have an answer.
Yeah.
Because I don't feel it. I really don't. I don't feel it. I know that if something happens and I have to parent my child by myself, then that's fine. Because, or if my husband has to do that, because I was here for the right reasons. He is here for the right reasons. And whatever happens to us, it's okay because we were there.
Mm-hmm.
And her daddy's a hero, and we'll be taken care of. This community will take care of us, and they'll take care of her.
Mm-hmm.
I don't matter. She matters. And our law enforcement community and our family will take care of my daughter.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I can put my head on a pillow every night and I don't worry.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the only time I do worry is when he'll shoot me a text me like I'm going to something bad, or he'll call me and I'm on my way to something bad and I hear the siren and he'll tell me he loves me and we'll be done.
Yeah.
But I have this, and I really don't understand how normal people are able to do it. I can't imagine this insurmountable worry. And I commend these ladies out here. I really do. I couldn't do it. Just the constant, because they don't have a radio. I can go.
You're talking about wives that are not in law enforcement?
Correct.
That have a spouse in law. Yeah.
Correct.
I got you.
And they wonder why their spouse is late, and they wonder, did something bad happen? Because I think, and it's for integrity of cases, but we're not transparent if something bad does happen.
Mm-hmm.
We wait a little bit.
Yep.
And, with social media now, they pick it up. But all you're going to see is officer critically injured or, officer involved shooting. You're not going to know. So I can't imagine being that person.
Mm-hmm.
And, the fear that they must live with. I can go get a radio, or surely the Lord, somebody's going to send me a text message.
Right.
So I really appreciate what their sacrifices.
Yeah.
And, it's I'm being kind of selfish because we're rolling up on Christmas and Matt has to work Christmas Day.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't get that day back.
Nope, they won't come back.
That's her first Christmas. So
didn't think of that.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a tough one.
And I never, because we've worked. How many Christmases have we worked?
That's been a bunch. Yep.
And other
I'd
people
say
had
50-50.
kids,
Yeah.
and we didn't even, because we're naturally we're self-serving people. But now it's real.
Yeah.
So, Kaylin has changed my life 180. I'm not the same person I was in April.
Of the same year.
Of the same year.
Yeah.
But I am the same person, genuinely. But my outlook has changed. My outlook on the career has changed. It's the best career. It's the best thing. This job's the best thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
And it's the most rewarding job.
Yeah.
But we talked about we leave a small piece of ourselves in every case.
I agree with that. I think that's a good way to put it. I know there was instances I was secretly invested in, and when I mean secretly, it was just I felt for the people.
Yeah.
I just there's a sense of just sorrow you feel for some of the victims that are truly innocent.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't forget those. Then there's people that completely are just dirt bags. I don't have a better terminology to say, really. But and you don't really remember those, but it's the I had one that was just a female, or her husband had passed away at an early age from natural causes. He was in his 40s, had a heart attack, and EMS was working on the subject, and she just came up to me and dropped to her knees and held my hand and said, please make, the EMS was working on the husband, and she was holding my hand, and she just looked up at me and said, please make them save him.
Yeah.
And I was like, what do you say to that?
Yeah, you don't.
It's just, that one will stay with me till I die, because I couldn't do anything. And she was like pouring her soul out to me.
And you're nobody. Like, you're nobody. You've never met this woman.
Do. That's right. That's the one that I'll never forget that. And I've seen a lot worse stuff, like way worse stuff, but that one's the one. And it's just a feeling of helplessness.
And you don't even think about that. Like, on your everyday journey, you probably don't even think about that. But sometimes like something will just hit you.
Yeah.
But I think that's what you don't understand until you've also been in positions. You can't understand where somebody's coming from until you've been in a similar situation. Mm-hmm. You can't understand grief until you've been there.
Yeah.
And so different life events as you go through your career, because, I started at 21 years old. Different life events will change your perspective, and that's okay. You will not be the same person that you were the day you took that oath of office. Mm-hmm. I won't be the same person in next year, in 5 years, and that's okay because we're progressing. As long as we keep moving forward, I don't think there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Just because my perspective changed on things doesn't mean that I'm weaker or that I'm less capable. I think I'm more capable now than I've ever been, especially to work the type of caseload that I enjoy working.
Yeah. So we'll move along just a bit. You spent your 5 years on patrol, then went to investigations. And if you need to take a break at any time, just let me know. Well, you went to investigations, and you were in special interest crimes. What was terminology?
So I worked general crimes.
General crimes.
But my specialty was child sexual assault victims and child physical assault. Mm-hmm. So crimes against children, crimes against families was my specialty, and I love major case. And you worked in do you have any idea how many square miles Lenoir jurisdiction is? No, without Googling it, I don't know off the top of my head. It's the largest city in Caldwell County, North Carolina, but Caldwell County is 420 square miles. I'm just roundabout. Lenoir is maybe 15% of that, I would say. Yeah. How much caseload did you have in that field of child assaults and violence toward children? I would average about 100 cases a year. That's a lot. That's a lot for Lenoir. And Caldwell County is astronomical as far as the sheriff's office. I'm not sure how those investigators juggle all of it, to be honest with you. And so for all those cases that are reported, and some of them are unfounded. Now, some of them, and unfounded, whether that be I don't have enough to say it did happen or unsubstantiated. But for all those cases, think about the cases that aren't reported. Well, that's a good point. I didn't really even think about that, to be honest with you. That's a lot. That's scary. Yeah. And so, I remember picking up my daughter, and she was screaming, and, I don't know what to do. I'm just new at this. And I just looked at her, and I was like, you're safe, and you're loved, and some babies don't have mamas and daddies that love them or care about them. Some babies are cold, and that's hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard stuff. So these investigators that come out here and do this, they really pour their heart and soul into this.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think what I would ask is that people understand that we try to get our cases to prosecution and go the fullest extent that we can. And sometimes it just doesn't work out.
Yeah.
And that there's so many reasons that it doesn't work out. Sometimes it's harder on our victims and our survivors to go through a judicial process. It is not mentally good for them. And
it's just reliving the court case.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's asking somebody in years to go back to a trauma that they have put behind them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard. You don't want to get up in front of strangers and talk about very intimate details of your life.
Yeah.
Or that maybe we just don't have enough evidence beyond a reasonable doubt to prosecute.
Mm-hmm.
There's some stuff there, but I think people aren't really educated in how much it takes to prosecute people in our justice system. And we may end up taking a plea for the best interest of our victim. And sometimes it's just tough.
Yeah.
And that takes that we bear the brunt of that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
As law enforcement officers. I'm only a fact finder. Here's the facts that I have, and I present that to the court or to the justice system, and I can't do anything beyond that.
Yeah.
And I have to trust in this criminal justice system. But beyond, after my job's done, it can take, you've got these prosecutors. You may only have 3 or 4 prosecutors in a county that's handling all these cases, and they're having to read a ton of files from, we have Hudson, Granite, Lenoir, and the sheriff's office turning all their files to one prosecutor's office. There's only 4 people there, 3 or 4 people. They're reading all these files. It could take years. And then tracking people down, making sure your witnesses, your law enforcement officers are still employed. It really is a lot.
So we talked about earlier the number of cases in a year, felony. And what was that number? About?
I believe it was 1,200. I believe that's what the number was given to me yesterday. It was 1,200 cases, roundabouts, come in from all of our law enforcement agencies to that one office. And those prosecutors, we've been down some prosecutors. So they've had vacancies there. So you're looking at 3 prosecutors reading 1,200 files and also handling other matters. They don't just read files all day. They have to handle, cases that are ongoing. And out of those, we've had 5 jury trials, I believe, this year. And that takes a lot on the justice system in itself, because they have to pick the jurors, and that takes a long time, and there's a whole lot that goes into this.
So I'll stop you right there for a minute, because out of those 1,200 approximately, how many go to trial in a year?
Well, they've had 5 this year.
Hey, that's the point I want the public to kind of understand better, is that when a case goes to trial, law enforcement's done with it. It's in a position where you present your findings of evidence to a court of justice, and there's a prosecutor, and there's a defense, and then there's a judge, jury, the whole gambit. And so you've got 1,200 of these, but they're picking 5 to go to trial. So law enforcement's shed with it. They're done everything they can possibly do with it at that point. And there's a bottleneck in the court systems. I don't know how you get ahead of that.
I don't know that. I think, and I think there's a bad, plea bargaining gets a bad name. And is it appropriate to every case? No, it's not. But there's a place for it, and you have to look at what's in the best interest of justice. Because although we have this grandiose idea of jury trials. It only takes one. You have to have unanimous, right? So, are we willing to run a gamble of this guilty, not guilty? Or are we willing to at least get some time and something out of this and get the case moving and put it to rest for the victim and their family's sake? We have to weigh that, and that's a hard thing. That's a real hard thing to talk about.
And just to put that in layman's terms, if you're doing 1,200 charges per year, felony charge, 5 roughly go to trial, then you have to start weighing out of those 5 that do go to trial. Could we possibly lose the case because of lackluster evidence or just a weak point in the case versus taking a plea bargain and getting something?
Correct.
Because you're only getting 5 out of those 1,200. So you have to pick and choose when a plea bargain is more beneficial to the general public.
And that's in any case. That's not just those 5.
And I think, because I've been guilty of it too, is like, they let that dude go off.
Yeah.
Somebody I charged, or, somebody else I knew. Like, how do they plea bargain that? It's a slam shut case.
Yeah.
And then you don't really understand the workload that a court has. And it's not just the area we're from. It is everywhere, in every state, every city. It's the same. It's a problem.
And think about, like, if we have a big incident, we have a shooting. Think about how many people are going to be subpoenaed.
Right.
So even as law enforcement officers, so you have a whole shift that goes. Well, can we decide on one day out of the whole year that we can all sit down and talk, and the defense has to take into account their schedules, and all of our schedules and all of our training and all of our vacations, and this one has a sick kid and this one has to do this. That's really difficult. Scheduling is a nightmare.
Yeah, that's a problem.
So that's just law enforcement officers.
Yep.
Not to account for the lay people who may have other struggles in their life. They can't get off work because they may work at a furniture factory. They may work somewhere on a point system, or they don't have childcare. They don't have this, or they don't have that. They don't have transportation. They don't have the finances. And we try, really, I think, and we do a good job in trying to help people with those issues if we know about them. But man, it's difficult. I think that people really don't understand. They think we can just pick a jury of 12 with 2 alternates and magic happens, and that's not true.
Yeah.
We're having trouble getting people to show up for jury pools. So I don't have the answers, but what I would like people to understand is that pleas aren't always a bad thing. Yeah. Especially if they're crafted in a way and you have a good prosecutor to craft them.
Well, getting something out of, if your case is important to you, if it involved a family member and you're just if you're standing by saying, I don't understand why they're taking so long with the case or why they're even going to explore a plea bargain, it just could be because that is the only resolution you'll get. Yeah. In a timely fashion anyway.
And, every case I work, I'm hugely passionate about, and I think that they should get the maximum, the structured sentence. But that's because I put a lot of work in this, and I know my cases from cover to cover. Yeah. And oftentimes, I feel like I know them more in depth than anybody. Because I really do put my heart and soul into it. And I think anybody that does a file, especially, big cases, they are passionate. And that's not, and there are, listen, it's just like with, bad apples in law enforcement. There are shortcomings in the justice system. I'm not saying that there isn't. But I do believe, especially in the county that we're from, we do try as a law enforcement officers to get cases moving and to get the justice that we after it leaves our desk, it's out of our hands.
Yeah, that's a court issue at that point. It's no longer in law enforcement hands.
And unfortunately, we are that front line
Right.
that people look to, and we're the only outlet that they have for their frustrations to vent. And we have worked alongside them, and so we do get some of that backlash.
Yeah.
But I don't hold the public, in any bad light for that. I understand where they're coming from.
So then, trying to move you along through your career just a little bit, after specializing with violence against children issues and crimes, you were promoted to the sergeant of CID.
Yes, sir.
How has that been, taking that leadership role?
I love it. I have the best investigators. And I think part of leadership is preparing them. I'm not always going to be here. And somebody's going to step into my role. So I need to prepare them for their future. And if that means getting them education, and that's one thing that I ask of them, is I want training requests. I want you to be the best person you can be. If you see yourself doing another position, let's start getting you in line to do that. And I believe in leading by example.
Mm-hmm. So
just because I'm the sergeant doesn't mean that I'm going to not work.
Right.
And I'm going to just delegate. Part of my job is delegation. That comes with the territory. But I believe in, if you ask somebody to do something, you should also be willing to do it too.
Absolutely. I think that's the key to being a good leader. I don't think the right word supervisor or manager is a leader. You got to lead the way, so that means you got to do it.
And if I'm the first person they call. If they get called to come work a scene, I'm the phone call that they make. And I do my very, very best to make sure that I go with them. Like I said, I worked up until my due date with Kaylin, and I went out to every crime scene with them. I take that back. I missed one phone call. But, I was pretty much 8-9 months at that point. But I try to really go with them. And I try to, keep them. I try to keep some of the cases off of them. I still take cases. I'm averaging probably about 100 like I was.
Yeah.
I try to be their advocate. If they need something, come ask me for it. Mm-hmm. I might have to tell you no, but you make me a good argument why you need it. Mm-hmm. And I'll go argue for you. I'll defend you. If you're right, I will defend you as far as I can go. Now, if you're wrong, we're gonna have to have a coming to the Lord meeting.
Right.
Every one of us have been wrong. Every one of us have had tempers flare. But I really try to be an inspiration for them.
Yeah.
And I try to, with the new trainees, I know it's a little bit different at the sheriff's office, but at Lenoir we give a week to the trainees to come in their field training program back to criminal investigations. And so I try to sit down with them, and a lot of times I know those individuals from teaching Billy T, but I try to just sit down with them and say, if you have a question, listen, the ground's level here. I'm no better than you are. If you have something that you want to talk about, we'll talk about it. And if you're out here on the road and you have something come up, I'd much rather you call and ask somebody than you do it out of ignorance and mess it up.
Right.
So I really genuinely try to be that person that people feel like they can come to. And I think that's part of being a leader. And I've always been so independent. I'm an only child, so I don't know if that's just something in my nature.
Yeah.
Where I just take on the burden.
I'm gonna stop you real quick because I just learned something about you. You're teaching some BLET class blocks?
Yeah, I teach 3 blocks.
Which blocks are you teaching?
So I teach interview and interrogation,
mm-hmm.
Crime prevention through environmental design, and I teach courtroom preparing testimony.
Mm.
And then so BLET is being restructured in January, so there'll be some different classes as well.
Excellent. This is I'm curious, how frequent are the classes happening, and are they filling up for BLET? Is there a good population of people that's coming in wanting to be a cop?
Yeah, I believe so. And a lot of these are pre-hires. It's not like when we started. We didn't get paid to go to BLET.
That's right.
So agencies are pre-hiring now. The Highway Patrol is also pre-hiring. And, you know, as tough as as far as our Lenoir Police Department, our hiring process is, the Highway Patrol is very, very hard. So they're also pre-hiring to send to BLET. And I really enjoy teaching. I get to see how people progress and how their brains develop and change as they go through. My first class usually starts kind of in the first couple weeks of BLET, or like the first few weeks of BLET. And so that's that interview and interrogation. I really get a glimpse of who people are in their ability to communicate. And then throughout our class, I get to learn things about them because I structure how I engage with them in a manner that I get information out of them without them knowing that I'm gathering it. Mm-hmm. And then by the end of it, they've told me so much about themselves, and I use that as a tool to teach them how to get information out of the people we engage with.
Yeah, they don't know you're collecting the data.
Yeah, they don't have a clue what they're telling me.
Spit it back to them, all right? Yeah, that's good. And
it's a fun class. Crime prevention through environmental design. I teach them about it midway through. That's a good icebreaker class where I get them involved on a boring topic, and we make it fun. And I take some things from you because you're business minded. So I asked them to create me a business model. Mm-hmm. And how would they secure, if they could go out here and make a business, whatever it may be, how would they secure that to ensure that they're not crime victims? Mm-hmm. And so I get them thinking outside the box. And then, you know, courtroom preparing and testimony is probably one of my favorite blocks. Something I'm hugely passionate about. But yeah, I love teaching.
So I guess where I want to go is, there for a while when I was still working, we were hearing stories of like Caldwell County was canceling some of the BLET classes. Now this was, you got to remember, over 6 years ago, give or take, that they couldn't fill up the classes. This was after a couple of high profile negative media incidences up north that had nothing to do with anybody in North Carolina even. But that nobody wanted to come sign up and take basic law enforcement training. So that's improving now.
Yeah, we're hopefully going to graduate 7, and that's still small, you know, but it's better than it was. I've taught classes where we had like 4 or 5.
So that's insane to me.
Yeah, I came from a huge class. I mean, 12 is a lot of people.
It is. I mean, I think we took 22, 23, and then graduated 15 or 16 out of that.
Yeah.
My class. But I had been watching. I'd been thinking about getting law enforcement, and I saw how big the classes were before me and even after me. And, you know, they're all about that size. But to hear a class that graduates 4, it's insane.
Yeah. And they're getting paid to go there.
Yeah, and that's the different part. It was everybody that I was talking about. If we had 23 people signed up, nobody was getting paid. And if it was during the day, was it a 4-month course? And if you take it at night, it's a 6-month course. Yeah. And you're not going to get paid for that.
Yeah. And
it's not even guaranteed a job.
And people are having families doing this.
Yeah. So now they are prior employed And they're getting paid to do BLET.
Yes, sir.
Is it like getting paid a full amount? Or is it?
I don't know. I can't answer that. I don't have a clue.
Yeah.
But they are getting, like, filling out timesheets.
That's insane. I mean, I think it's a good thing.
It's awesome.
I'm not
good for
complaining.
them.
I'm not saying it's just so unorthodox to me. Is I wish I got paid for training.
Yeah.
That would have been a nice thing.
I mean,
Because it's a long haul, whether you do it
is.
full-time days or 6 months at night.
and now the new BLET is going to incorporate. They're going to come out with their. I don't know if they're going to come out with ARIDE, but they'll come out with their SFST. They'll come out with NTOX.
Yeah.
And so that's going to extend it to like 6 months.
Yeah.
So we're going to start in January and end in like June. And I don't know how this is going to go.
Yeah.
They've revamped a whole bunch of stuff. We're just going to have to see. It's just like everything else. But it needed so badly to be those videos. Some of the material.
Old. Yeah.
You know, they still talk about the jail matrons being in dresses and in some of my blocks. And it's so old. And the kids now are all digital. And what I hate when I teach, and I can't help it. Remember the big 3-ring binders we had?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Still got them.
Yeah, I do too. Somewhere, they're all on laptops.
So there's no binders anymore.
There's no binders. Well, I don't see the binders. If there's binders, I don't see them.
They still charge you $100 for the content.
I'm sure they do. But the kids or the students are sitting there, the cadets are sitting there, and they have these laptop screens up. Well, I'm paranoid. I don't know what's on the other side of that laptop screen. You know, if you have a book in front of you, I can at least see.
That's a good point.
The material.
You think there's somebody in there not paying attention, looking at?
Oh, I'm sure.
Surfing the web.
I'm sure.
Yeah, that's one you want to cut.
But you know what? It's not my education. And I have to keep that in mind. And that's what I learned as an instructor when I went through. And I just remember all those in-services we sat through. And we'd sit back there and lean back and doodle. But standing up there in front of people teaching is hard.
I bet you can get a pretty good grasp of who is your top candidates in a class pretty quickly.
Well, no.
Really?
I've had some very good students, very good cadets on paper just can't function. But I've had some pretty bad students be excellent cops. So I can't.
So that's intriguing.
It is.
Tell me what the main struggle that you're seeing from students when they actually get into the job space. Where do they struggle?
Interacting.
Yeah.
Interacting. And I attribute that to COVID kids. Because you're by this point, those, when they had to have that hiatus from actual in-person school to digital school, are now at the age of entering the job market.
Right.
So I think that they've lost this person-to-person interaction. They don't know what to say. They don't know how to head on real-world problems. If it's not something digital that we can solve with a phone or, you know, a laptop, we freeze. We can't get past it.
And for like the students that you said weren't maybe at the top of the class or mediocre even, that ended up getting into the profession too, you said some of them excelled very well. Was it because they could talk better or communicate better?
I don't know. I just think that you can put that lesson plan in front of somebody and you can force it into their brain, but it has nothing to do with the actual job. You learn some stuff, but until you put them in a real life scenario, where this is serious, these are real people's real problems. This is a couple that's been married for 30 years and they're in a disagreement. How are you going to fix it? You are the person they're looking to for a solution.
Yeah.
Until that hits home for them, it's not going to matter. I can sit there all day and read to them about how to handle a situation. Until they're able to be in that situation, you'll not know how they're going to react.
Yeah.
So I can't gauge the success of a student.
Yeah.
And especially meeting with them, I have them like maybe 32 total hours. And then we're on different subject matters.
And y'all still do, in courtroom preparation block, you still do like mock giving testimony?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We do. And, I try to prepare them as best I can. And they all speak very well. We prepare.
Right.
But that's nothing until the day that you get up there on your trial.
Yeah, it's like, I honestly went from watching, court-related fictional movies, A Time to Kill, obviously, A Few Good Men or whatever Tom Cruise had. And you see that courtroom environment, and you go through the block you teach, courtroom preparation, and you do the mock. But it's like you're only up there for 15 minutes, and it's going to end eventually, whether you did good or bad. 15 minutes, you're done. And all right, so that's kind of me. I had a bunch of movies, then I had courtroom prep, and then the first time I testified in court was, they just call you up there and you go sit down and you swear in, and now it's on.
Yeah, it's real.
And you're thinking about, do I give a long answer or a short, brief answer? and you don't know really how to. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff rolling through your head.
Did I raise my correct hand? I raised the wrong hand. Yeah.
That's a lot of stuff you worry about in the beginning. And
it's so silly.
It doesn't even matter.
No, it doesn't matter. And you don't want to embarrass yourself, but you also don't want to do a disservice to the person that's on trial.
Yeah.
And it's a lot. It's a lot that we ask of people that do this job.
So that's the thing I want to get across, is a lot of the stuff that you were worrying about. Now, if your trainer says you need to work on this, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the stuff you have anticipations about in your brain. Like going to court, talking on the radio for the first few times. Don't worry about it. It's going to come.
It'll come.
And you're not going to even think about it eventually.
But
you'll stress yourself out worrying about it.
And I remember my corporal, and we didn't always get along. We didn't get off on the right foot, but he always said, don't sweat the small stuff, and everything's small stuff.
Yeah.
And, over the course of my career, I've had to tell him, like, cause now we're good. We're good now.
Yeah.
Now we joke and kid and laugh, and, but I really appreciated him saying that. And I didn't understand it back then. It really frustrated me. What do you mean everything is small stuff? It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. The things you're worried about, you'll get through it.
Mm-hmm.
You'll get through it. It's not anything that we can't fix. As long as you are truthful, you tell the truth, you admit when you make a mistake. Everybody makes mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
But it really seems silly looking back.
No, I think it's just part of it. There's like not an outlet that I have found in my journeys in law enforcement to where anybody just said, take it easy a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like you have to perform. You have to get it right. There's no errors.
Now, I have been told to calm down a little bit.
Yeah.
Because, you know me, I come at everything 110, so I'll kick a door off an office hinge. I want to know why this is not done, you know. And I've had supervisors say, hey, you need to chill out for a minute.
Yeah.
Go do something. Go get your nails done. Like, you are way up here. And that just infuriates me because I'm really passionate.
Well, I know the feeling. I think there's a point where, because you're carrying your own stresses from whatever's on your plate too. And you have to be able to manage that part of it. There's been times where I've read some DORs that I was definitely not pleased with. Like 2-sentence DORs on a field training.
You've had those too?
Well, I'm talking about I'm sitting there as a supervisor reading another field trainer officer. I said, you spent 12 hours with this individual and you can write 2 sentences.
Oh, yes. I was
Please.
always very diligent because I think that's a civil liability that we incur.
Yeah.
You know, we're still responsible for these people way beyond, and I want to make sure that I did a good job.
Mm-hmm.
I would write pages.
Yeah. Well, it's important I think Wednesdays are the negligence days that they cover for field training officer school. I think they talk about negligence or not negligence. My words, liabilities. I think they cover it on Wednesdays. And after that Wednesday class, I was like, my God, if you're not writing everything down, what you observe this individual doing. Because I'm going to tell you, if an officer messes up, let's say he's finished with field training and he goes on to his career, and it's 5 years down the road, they do something that is negligent. The first thing they look at is that officer's training records. So that's what you did 5 years earlier. And if those, whether it be prosecutors or defense attorneys or the court in general, are looking at your DORs on how you're training, and you've got 2 sentence documentation for a 12-hour shift, that is not going to look good on you as a trainer, and it could have consequences for you.
I just think it's good. It's, you're doing a service for that cadet as well, or that trainee.
Yeah, I mean, you do in diligence. It's not just a babysitting job for 12 hours to get them guys out of the car.
Yeah.
You're actually training them what to do.
I mean, I'm trying to save their lives.
Yes.
And I'm trying to make them have a long, prosperous career. Or if they're just not getting it, we need to realize we're not getting it. And it's not for everybody. That's all right.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I don't hold it against anybody. If they want to leave, if that means that they're my subordinate and they want to go to greener pastures, they want to go to a different agency or state agency or federal agency, good. How can I help you get there?
Yeah.
Or if it's a cadet or a trainee that is not getting it, what do we need to do?
Yeah.
And, I think for you and I, and going back to the education that we started with in the beginning, talking about the importance of documentation, that is where that need for education comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And to know how to get those facts or those observations on a piece of paper.
Yep. I've had guys that has a hard time opening up Word. I'm talking about Microsoft Word here.
Yeah.
And just writing everything on Word and letting it autocorrect everything. I've had people do that and copy and paste what they've got on Word into their report, and it's still filled with punctuation errors. And even if you look at it on Word, it tells you these are errors. They're, red underline, and people have not caught it. But they're good officers.
They are.
And there's a fine line where you have to be critical on and point out to them, it's like, hey, bud, you got to take time on doing this report. This thing could end up in federal court. You never know where the end is on this. And explain that to them why it's important. But on the same thing, you don't want to cut him short because he's excelling or her in other fields at a very good rate that is superior. So, there's a fine line. The thing I can't do is I can teach you how to be a cop. I can't teach you how to read and write. That's not what I signed up for.
No, that's not my job.
And I'm not going to do it. If you've made it this far, which I don't understand how you can make it through the BLET exam, the state exam, however many blocks BLET consists of now, and that not be an issue.
It's all fill in the blank. It's all multiple choice.
So it's not any really writing parts anymore.
No, and that's what other agencies I've seen have made them prepare writing. I don't know if they had a prompt. I really don't know, but I do know that they request them to write in part of their hiring process.
Yeah, I think that needs to be a very important.
I do
part.
I read narratives, so in the morning I do paperwork, and so I read every report that comes through there.
Yeah.
And my Lord, sometimes, and it's across the board. I read everybody's, because I try to do a good job of knowing if the sheriff's office has something in common with our cases. It's not just, it's across the board, and I think that's across the board in our education system.
Mm-hmm.
Coming from high school out, or middle school, high school, is something we're going to have to work on as a society.
Yeah. And I think that's been dwindling for a very long time, not just here recently. I think since the time I got out of high school, which was in 1994, a long, long time ago. And within 5 years of me being out of high school and talking to people I knew that were still in high school, and they were like, "Oh, well, Miss Kaiser doesn't even teach that anymore." And I was like, "What?" And then cursive, they don't even teach cursive, which this is probably making me look like a weirdo because that's been forever ago. They quit teaching that, but it's just like it seems like every generation that comes through, there's something that I know of that was taught to me when I was prior to 18 years old that they're kind of omitting now.
Well, they don't even know that sentences don't end in prepositions.
See, that's weird. I don't even understand that.
They don't understand, punctuation. They don't, and I really do blame that on a generational. We have screwed them up. We've set them up for failure. We have.
Why it's important for law enforcement is you have to be so detailed in your word. I mean, it all starts in a simple police report. That's where everything starts.
Everything. And what you observed. Like, it's not, I went to this location for this call and then I cleared. It's what you saw. It's when you walked in the side door, the front door, everything is perspective.
Yeah. So
I need to know if you walked in the front door, what room did you walk into? What did you observe? Was the decedent supine? Were they, what were their hands doing? What do they look like? What did you smell? What did you hear? And the reason that what you're saying is important is because there's an educated defense attorney that's going to pick it apart, saying, well, you did not specify this in your report. What color shirt was he wearing, by the way? Because you remember what door you came in, what color shirt was he wearing? Right. And the more detail you can get in that report, and I accredit that I didn't have to go to court too awful many times because of how good my reports were. That's exactly right.
It'll keep you out of court.
That's exactly right.
If you take a lazadate, if you just do a half-ass report and it goes to trial, there's a high probability they're going to call you into court because they want to crucify you on the stand. Right. If you take time and write your reports to the best you can, or higher elevated, just not because everybody on your shift, well, this is how they do it, and so I'll do it that way, and the supervisor sign off on it. You take your time and you put extra effort into it, it'll keep you out of court.
I agree. And I think that goes further into it in cases. If you're an investigator and you do a good job and you write a good investigator summary, mm-hmm. and you summarize, if you take and do a body cam interview with somebody, or you do an interview room interview with somebody, and you summarize that interview, mm-hmm. that takes the work off of the DA, and you're more likely that you can either negotiate a good plea or figure something out, get that person to plead guilty to the case, because it's all right there. They're not having to go fish for it. They're not having to make guesses. Yeah. And I really am so passionate about that report writing block in BLET and continuing that. And I try to, and I know that the officers probably think that it's harping sometimes on them, but it's not. This stuff matters. It does matter. I think it's not. I think officer safety, absolutely number one priority. Paramount, yes. It is the pinnacle. Making sure all your guys and girls that you work with go home, that's secondary. And then I think the third most important thing is probably how you conduct yourself in your investigation. Even if you're a patrol officer, you're still an investigator. Right. And how you document it. Yeah.
Then it goes down to supervisor documentation, whether you're a FTO or you're a sergeant or lieutenant, and how you document the things that happen on your shift and how you handled it. And if you just talk to the individual to fix an issue, still document it.
Yeah, mediation. Absolutely.
Yep. You just can't write it off and say, well, I'll talk to him and he's going to be good now. You document it,
right,
that you did that, because it could help that officer down the road, or it could help yourself. Documentation is so important. It's like, it's not as important as officer safety and the safety of your partners, but it is like right behind it.
It really is.
It's the thing you got to do. And nobody wants to do reports. It sucks. It's boring.
I don't want to do it.
But you got to do it. It's like, it's so important.
You know, these guys and law enforcement and I feel so bad for them on the road. And I understand. I remember those days. And, you know, sometimes I think other people who are moved out of positions of just a road position get accused of forgetting where they came from. And I haven't. I try to go answer calls if they're backed up. I try to help them. But as a whole, I think we have become too much to too many.
Mm-hmm.
We are too much to too many people. We're the dog catchers.
Yeah.
We're the clergy. We are everything, and everything falls on us now.
Yeah, and there's businesses making money off us.
Yeah.
Every time I see a CPI commercial, I'm like, do you know that this business model has made sensors that can tell you when your windows are open or your door is open or somebody kicks it in, whatever, or if it's just open by accident, if a gust of wind blew too hard and you didn't have it latched and it blows your door open, that CPI alarm goes off. Well, what does it do? It contacts 911, and there's an alarm response. Well, who responds? It's law enforcement of some jurisdiction. And if they didn't have the law enforcement aspect, their business model absolutely crumbles.
Right.
I don't have specific numbers. I've talked about this earlier in a previous podcast, but that is like, we're talking about call volume, and everybody sends it to law enforcement, no matter if law enforcement can do it or not. I understand that alarms are very much a law enforcement sensitive thing, but when 98% of the things are false,
right,
there's a time where that product, whether it's CPI, I'll never get sponsored by CPI, sorry, but CPI is absolutely consuming law enforcement resources.
Yeah.
And there's some agencies that are like, if they had 10 false alarm in just a period of 2 or 3 months, that they'll send out a notice and say, hey, we responded 15 times in the last 90 days to false alarms. You can, try to fix what the issue is with it, because if it continues to happen, there's going to be a surcharge from the county or whatever agency, jurisdiction, because you're using so much. But when you talk about 80,000 people in a community and everybody's got an alarm, they've got a Ring doorbell now, they got motion detectors, motion sensitive lights, cameras, and everything's going to a phone. They could be in Myrtle Beach or wherever they are in the world and see that somebody's walked in front of their house on the sidewalk and it looks suspicious.
Everybody's suspicious.
He turned around and looked at my front door. And that, okay, I get it. If that's a rare occurrence in your neighborhood and somebody is standing in front of your house on the sidewalk and just gazing at your front door, it could be very strange. But there comes a time where it seems like everything's going to be linked to a sensor or a camera, and law enforcement's going to have to respond.
Yeah. So
when do you either hire a ton more law enforcement or either take away some off the plate that law enforcement's responsible for? Sorry, CPI.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for it, but I really do believe we're too much to too many, and you're asking these young officers they don't get a break.
Yeah.
They really don't. And so, when we're putting all that on top of them, and then we're asking them to go deal with problems that they can't resolve. Mm-hmm. And you're just creating this big circle.
Yeah.
And you're creating more stress for them, and then they have to go do the reports. So it's a give and take.
Mm-hmm.
either you want them to succeed here or there.
Yeah.
And I think they do get overwhelmed, and I think we've tried to do a good job.
Yeah. Well, it's just, I think when alarms are important, I'm not trying to harp on community services that are for security, related that law enforcement responds to or anything. But I do want the public to understand that every time an alarm call does go off, there's a officer that's going to respond to it, and it's taking one or maybe even two away from stuff that could happen while they're en route to your house.
Right.
And alarms are important. People need them. So, but there's a point where everybody in the world's got them. Like everybody's got them, and everybody's going to have a false alarm on occasion.
What about tree downs?
Oh gosh.
Like during the hurricane, we were just slammed.
So there was a point where I considered carrying a chainsaw in the trunk of my car.
Matt does carry a chainsaw.
And then I started, and it's cool. Hey, I can clear the road and save somebody else from that does get hired to clear the road. I can just save them coming out here. And there comes a point where you have to consider, where do you draw the line?
Yeah.
I mean, because that can continue. So, well, I've got a chainsaw. Maybe I need a 10-foot pole where I can grab a power line and push it out of the way.
A dog catching pole.
Yeah, a dog catching pole. I did
have a dog catching pole in my car.
So at one point I took the chainsaw out of the car. It's like, that is not my job. Now I've got other stuff that nobody else has to deal with but me.
Do you remember the bear call when you had the bear out there on Abington Road?
I remember bear calls. I can't remember what I did.
You were like, I'm not getting out of the car. Y'all boys
no,
get out of the car.
I'm not fighting bears today. So,
everybody else is intrigued, and Joe's like, no, I'm not today. No bears.
Yeah. I've seen bears on National Geographic. I'm educated what they look like. Joe don't need to.
No, Joe don't need that.
Joe don't need to pet the bear.
No. But and it's funny because that just reminded me of the steel conversation with the backpack blower.
Oh.
But that's another, it's it's the things you just remember.
Law enforcement is filled with good times. It's not all hard and stressful.
No.
There's a lot of good times in law enforcement.
It's the
first responders in general.
Greatest show on earth.
Very entertaining a lot of times. Sometimes it's not. But
it's a
lot of times it is.
But it's because of us. I mean, I really do believe it's how you get along with people, the personalities, different people. Some people aren't as articulate or eloquently spoken as others, and
yeah. It's definitely something you never run out of stories. If you do law enforcement or first responders, whether it's paramedic or fire, if you do it for a year, you're going to have a lifetime of stories to tell. If you do it for 10 years, you've got 10 lifetimes to tell.
I wish I'd written it all down.
I think people in the careers should document more of their journey. I think it's important. That's why I'm doing this. I think it's important for other people to tell their story coming up, because yours is different than mine. Mine's different from everybody else's. And it's, I think, how it impacts your life, how it makes you as a person, how it develops you in the career. Some people don't stay in the career, and then some people find that it is their absolute passion. So it's kind of what that is to give people an opportunity to tell that book. Yeah. Just a small piece of it, because 2 hours can't describe it.
All the bad stuff, all the mayhem and all the death and everything bad in this world that you could possibly see. I would not trade a minute of it, because I would never have met Matt. I would never, I would never have my baby. I would never have met all these wonderful people. Mm-hmm. I've got to do some really cool stuff. I've got to travel. It really is the greatest blessing. And it does change you, but what is life worth living if you're not changing?
Yep.
You know, you've got to continually push forward, and yeah, we see some bad things. You know, the average person, how many dead people you think that the average person sees their whole life?
The average person?
Yeah, just a normal person.
I'd say it's probably less than 5. And that's probably like relatives even. Like, well, I saw I was at the hospital when my grandparent passed away. I'd say 5, maybe even high, maybe 3 for the average person.
And those are in casket, you know, like, for the most part, you know. And so I think when you engage with a law enforcement officer, or anybody that's done this, whether it be medic, fire, whatever, you know, we have this weird sense of humor, this dark sense of humor. You know, we have to laugh about things, because I mean, I don't know how many deaths I've worked in my whole career.
Well, you're gonna get 3 in a month, at least that.
As a road officer,
maybe even in a week. It's just depending.
Yeah.
But you're gonna get 3 in a month. That's guaranteed.
And I mean, people's houses and things, we see the worst things, so we become just numb to it. That's just every day.
Yeah. I mean, I found that. I mean, it seemed like the first handful of times you had a body, whether it was natural, somebody passed away of natural causes or something else, there is like this sense of, well, you walk in there and everybody's quiet because there's a body laying there.
Yeah.
Nobody's loud, ever. And it's, as you do it more, you come in, it's like, well, this looks pretty natural. And you go around and you're like, anybody found his ID yet? And everybody's like, I don't know, it might be back there in the bedroom. You can tell who's done it enough, because you don't want to call it you're hardened to it. It's just, it becomes more, I hate to use the word routine, but that's what it is.
Task oriented.
Yes.
You have a task and you've got to achieve certain things.
Yes.
No, and so Matt calls me a couple weeks ago, and it's like, you know, I'm making supper and I'm dealing with the baby, and he's like, yeah, well, I've got this, and he tells me it's really tragic death that he's going to. I was like, oh, okay, so do you want spaghetti or do you want takeout?
Yeah.
You know, and it just, normal people will be just, oh my goodness. And that's a Tuesday for us.
Yeah.
And so I think that's hard to explain to our family and friends, is it is our normal. Yeah. And so when you have something tragic go on in your life, that's how you handle it. Just because I had something tragic, I just kept it moving.
Yeah.
I mean, in spite of my emotional moment a minute ago, or a few minutes ago, I kept it moving, and I didn't react like normal people do. Mm-hmm. But I think that's because you and I have seen so much that we know how to handle things.
Yeah. Well, I've seen that with my family. I've been talking about things before that went toward the darker side of the story to tell, and they're like, you have to tell all those details. Like, no, I don't. You just don't think about not leaving them out.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's not that you want to talk about, it's just stuff that you encounter. And I think people need to be able to tell their story and get it out. But you got to be picky who you tell it to, because if you're telling it to somebody that's not dealing with first responders, that could be graphic to them.
Yeah, it's super traumatic for them.
And there's really not much I haven't seen now.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, I remember a motorcycle accident that was just morbid, horrible. You can't get much worse. That I told that story for a long time, but just because every day it was on my mind. It was like, I can't believe I just saw that.
Yeah.
And but now I think because I had the opportunity to really get it out of my system after it happened earlier, you know, it's something I still will never forget. But when you tell it to somebody that's not been in law enforcement, you really don't want to tell it like I see it in my head.
Right.
Yeah. Because it's rough.
Yeah. And I never want people to experience the things that I've had to do.
Yeah.
Or see the things that I've had to see. But I personally find the human body to be super intriguing. How much trauma somebody can take, what things can do to people. That's how I get through things. I think it's cool. And you know, like I said, things have changed for me, but you really have to find, and for your, you know, if you have a loved one who's a first responder, find somebody that they can have that camaraderie with and not be judged by it.
Yeah.
Luckily, you know, Matt's father is a career fireman. We all understand, and we try to keep it PG in front of everybody else. But
yeah.
I mean, that's just our Tuesdays. That's our everyday life.
Yep. Sure. Yeah.
And you know, I think we're probably winding down with our conversation today, huh?
Yeah, and I want to tell you, I really appreciate you coming in and giving your perspective on your journey through here, and because I think it's important. I wish I had 10 more individuals just like you to talk to and tell their perspective. I think it's important for women to get their voices out in law enforcement and their story, and to relieve some anticipations that other women may feel about the career, because law enforcement needs men and women right now.
Right.
Good ones.
And you know, it's nothing that I've done. It's nothing to brag on me. It is absolutely not. But I want people to come into this and to represent whoever you are. I don't care if you're black, white, brown, purple, male, female. I don't care, but you have to represent yourself and your family in a positive light. And you know, and that'll transcend through your agency and your career. Yeah. And so one thing I figured you were going to ask me, because everybody does, is what's going to happen if my daughter wants to do this job? Like, what?
That's a good one. Let's go that route.
You're going to get a different answer from my spouse, but if my child comes to me and says, I want to do this, how can we make you successful at it? If that's what you're drawn to do, I'm not going to discourage her. And, you know, I know you had Jordan on, and I remember after Jordan got out of the hospital, I went to his house, and his mom was there, and, you know, she was expressing concern. If your child is brave enough to do it, you have to be brave enough to let them. And that's hard.
Dad.
Yeah. But if your child is brave enough to come out here and want to do it, and you have to be brave enough to let them and trust them. Yeah. I will never discourage my daughter. This is the greatest job. It has given me everything. Yeah. And I work at one of the greatest agencies probably in this state. Yeah. And I have great supervisors and great leaders there, and they've taken care of me. And I trust that they'll take care of her too. Yeah. So.
Well, I'm glad you come and talk to me today. I hope a lot of people watch your stuff when we air this thing, and I hope it inspires somebody.
I hope it does. That's the only thing that this career, you know, if I could save one person or if I could help one person, my career is worth it.
Yep,
so
it is.
I do appreciate you having me and you having us down here today.
Well, thank you, Stella.
All right. Thank you, Joe.
All right.